All right, Nick, let's talk about the Texas Longhorns. This is a team moving over to the SEC. I think there's a lot of big aspirations after last year. Disappointing finish as far as what you wanted to happen, but if you take a step back now and look how far they got, you got to be pretty proud of what they were able to do. This is a very, very talented, very powerful team moving over to the SEC, and I think continuity is key. And Texas has made a couple of moves here that I think speak to that very well. Let's get into the article, and I want to know your thoughts on this, Nick, on the other side. This, of course, is from over on Horns 24/7. Says Texas defensive coordinator Pete Kwiatkowski, I'm going to go with that, offensive coordinator and O-line coach Kyle Flood, and special teams coordinator and tight ends coach Jeff Banks are getting contract extensions through the 2026 season. According to the agenda for an upcoming meeting of the Texas System Board of Regents, the Texas defense has improved in each of Kwiatkowski's last 3 seasons with the Longhorns. The Longhorns have also seen dramatic improvement in their run defense in the past 3 seasons, and Texas has also been among the nation's best in special teams under Banks in each of the past 3 years. Nick, I think this just speaks to Texas, Sarkisian. They're making really smart moves, keeping the continuity of the core of this team together as far as OCDC special teams coordinators. And I think they're going to go very, very seamlessly into the SEC because of that. I'm curious what your thoughts are. But Texas fans, in the comment section below, 3 important coaches are re-signed. But I want to know from you, which one do you think is the most meaningful to this Texas team? Let us know in the comment section below. But Nick, what are your thoughts on this latest by Texas?
So I think it's smart strategy by Texas re-signing these assistant coaches. And I love the dates that they're re-signed through the 2026 season. And that's obviously a couple years in the future. But I think the whole point here in Texas is strategy. And I think it's smart. They're recognizing they're in the middle of a paradigm shift. Look, obviously competing in the Big 12, recruiting in the state of Texas and recruiting nationally, they've done that for a long time. But the reality is, and this is just a cold-blooded truth, the SEC is a 100% different animal in terms of recruiting, in terms of game planning, in terms of schedule. It just is. It is absolutely brutal competing over every prospect, competing over every game, competing over every inch. It's a completely different dynamic than the Big 12. Now, Texas, in order to handle that, they need kind of everybody on board. They need to be stable. They need to be everybody they can trust working together on that staff. Because if you have to handle filling out positions, if you got to handle, hey, who's my next defensive coordinator? Or, hey, I hired a new offensive coordinator. Do I trust him? If you have to handle those issues, Alabama just got all your recruits. LSU just got all your recruits. If you have to handle, hey, is my special teams coordinator a guy I can trust? Hey, guess what? Georgia just blocked 3 punts on you this past weekend, right? If you're messed up in those kind of directions as you're in the middle of this transfer to the SEC, you're going to have problems. And I think this is a smart move by Texas saying, okay, we want to be stable as we move over to the SEC because we need to be focused on making sure we handle this correctly. Because the reality is, Texas fans, you do not want to be Texas A&M. They did not handle the transfer very well. A&M has kind of been up and down since moving to the SEC. And frankly, they've been a lot more down than up over the past few years, especially with Jimbo Fisher really screwing up a lot of these assistant coaches, right? He was moving off play calling duties, finding new coordinators, coaches moving in and out, right? Struggling to keep recruits. They would transfer and leave College Station, go to other SEC programs. Texas, I think, recognized that the A&M transfer to the SEC did not go very well for the Aggies, and they're focused on saying, okay, let's be stable, let's keep our core group together and make sure we're focused 100% on making sure we handle this successfully. Because if you can do it successfully and integrate yourself into the SEC with a strong start, recruiting and results on the field, you'll be set for a long time. But if you start slow, the Alabamas, the LSUs, the Auburns, the Georgias, the Tennessees, the Floridas, even the programs that aren't winning a lot right now, they'll slowly but surely just supersede you in terms of recruiting. And once you go down that path, it can be harder and harder to build yourself out of it. And I think Texas recognizing that and focusing on continuity as they get ready to move to the SEC is a really smart move by their administrative staff.
Yeah, Nick, I think this is great. And the point you bring up, keeping the core together, continuity, that is key as far as things go. And you want to keep the momentum, like you said. You look at Texas 2024 commitments, they're number 5 in the country. They're number 6 overall as far as bringing in new guys, as far as high school guys coming in to Texas. They're number 7 in the country as far as transfers coming into Texas as well. So they're very, very high, top 10 in both of those metrics as far as bringing in talent to Texas. And like you said, if you go over to the SEC, if you transfer to this new paradigm shift, as you put it, and you lose some of these coaches, you lose some of this steam. This is what you need right now, quite frankly, to keep par with some of these guys in the SEC, to compete, to keep going. Obviously, you're at the top right now, but to keep on the same levels as the Georgias, as the Alabamas, as the other LSUs, the other teams in the SEC, you have to keep this momentum going. And like you said, one small misstep and you see these numbers plummet. You're like 20th in transfer rankings. You're 20th, in recruiting for high school. This could be something really big for Texas if they were to let one of these guys go, but to sign them all, to keep everything as far as terms of recruiting and to keep this momentum going forward. I really like what we're seeing from Texas because they're already doing great. We don't want to see them take any steps back.
And again, I know Texas fans, I know a lot of you guys, I think you're really confident. I think you'll do well in the SEC, but it is so brutal recruiting wise and now transfer wise as well. Remember, the Tennessee Volunteers, they're one of the top programs, a blue blood program for a long time in college football, especially in the SEC. They have one or two down years. It took them like a decade to get back on top in terms of recruiting, and they're still not a great contender. They just win 9, 10 games kind of thing, right? The Florida Gators, it wasn't long ago, they were the best program in the country, one of the top contenders. Now they're struggling to get good recruits and good transfers and rebuild that program. The SEC is so competitive. It is so brutal that one or two missteps and you get in this death spiral in recruiting, and it's really hard to dig your way out of it. Texas, I think, is doing the smart thing, trying to avoid that, keeping the core group together, keeping a strategy in place during this transition. I commend the Texas Longhorns athletic department. I commend Coach Sark for recognizing that a lot of other programs didn't, namely Texas A&M. The Longhorns did, and I think it'll play to their benefit as they work through this move to the SEC.